What's up, guys? Greg Haw here with I Like Collectibles. Today I have a very special guest. I have a Spider-Man super fan. His name is Bruce Wechtenhiser, and he is hailed out of Pennsylvania. How are you?
Good to see you there, and thanks for having me on your broadcast here today. And I've been watching some of your things, and I really enjoy your passion for collectibles, and I share the same passion. And mine's been focused on Spider-Man for over 55 years.
I see that. And I've had a chance to kind of look over your website, and it's some very impressive stuff. For anyone, before I get started, check out below in the link. You can see there's a scrolling link here for his website, which is spideyandme.com. Very impressive website.
Oh, thank you. I just developed that in the springtime to kind of kick off the presentations I've been doing at conventions. We can talk about that later on, but that's a new aspect to my hobby, talking about my life and the things that we're going to talk about here tonight. I've enjoyed doing it in interviews, so now I'm taking it on the road to conventions. But that website kind of gives you a feel for my collection and what I do at the convention.
Awesome. Well, there's a lot to get into, so let's get started with what started your passion for Spider-Man?
What started? Well, like any good superhero, you got to have a great origin story, Greg. And mine started way back when in the 1960s with the very first cartoon. And it had the best theme song of all time. It's still the best with Spider-Man. Spider-Man does whatever a spider can. And I was about 3 or 4 years old, and my brothers and my sister were all older than me. And they said, "Hey, Bruce, come on over and check out this new cartoon. It's Spider-Man." I'm like, "What the heck is a Spider-Man?" So I went over and checked it out. We already knew about Batman and Superman, but I started to fall in love with this character just because of the color scheme and the cool things that he was doing with webs and climbing walls. And the more I got to know the character and his backstory, the more I fell in love with it. But that's where it all started in the original run of the cartoon, and it kind of snowballed from there. My brother brought home a comic book one day from the corner store, and we had comic books already, but we didn't have any Spider-Man comic books. So as soon as I got one, I wanted more of those Spider-Man comic books, and I couldn't even read at the time, so my mom would read them to me. She'd skip some panels. I found out later on when I started to read, but I've been a pat rack all my life, a pack rat, and I have kept that comic book. And in fact, I'll show it to you later on. It's still here with me. It's on the wall, and I've had Stan Lee and John Romita, the artist, sign that first issue, and thankfully I've kept it with me all these years.
Oh wow! So you had Mr. Romita and Stan Lee sign it for you. That's awesome.
Yeah, it was fun to meet those guys, and I met Stan at 2 different signing events, one in 1986, one in 1996, and thankfully I was taken to the home of John Romita from a good friend of mine who was friends with the family and had a lot of dealings with John Romita. In 2019, I went to John Romita's home, and he's a great guy, very down to earth. His wife was so wonderful, and he signed my comics and a couple other things I'll show you here today. But some of these things, Greg, that I tell you, if I made this list and I showed you all the things that have happened to me in my lifetime that dealt with Spider-Man, it's hard to believe that it would happen just to one person. I can't hardly believe it, and it's happened to me. Sometimes I have to wake up in the morning and look at my website or other places and say, did these things all really happen to me? Did I go to John Romita's house? And you said I hail from Pennsylvania, which is true. I've lived my whole life here in Johnstown, Pennsylvania, and I was a Spider-Man collector for 25 years, sold out. I was buying everything. I was doing everything with Spider-Man. And I finally found out when I was about 30 years old, turned over a Spider-Man trading card, and on the back it said that Steve Ditko, the guy who created Spider-Man, was from Johnstown, Pennsylvania. And I almost fell over. I mean, you can pick me up off the floor. I've lived my whole life in Steve Ditko's hometown, so I'm getting goosebumps just telling you these stories, Greg. But all these things that connected me, intertwined me with Spider-Man, there's just too many of them to be coincidences. And I tell people all the time that for whatever reason, one part of my life, God's plan was that I would be intertwined with this character, with Spider-Man. And it's been going on for over 55 years. But I truly believe that it's been God's plan, and I've really been blessed by it. It's not the most important part of my life. I have a great family, great children, wife. I have a great job, and all those things are much more important to me. But the Spider-Man part is very important, and there's been so many connections, Greg, and that's why I'm telling my stories at the conventions, because it just gives me a lot of joy to tell my stories, and people like to see the shocked looks on their faces when I tell them story after story after story of all these cool things that have happened to me as I've collected Spider-Man over the years.
That's awesome. That's really cool that you come from the same hometown as Mr. Ditko, because there's no
Yeah.
more Spider-Man than the guy that created him, right? So,
Yeah, exactly.
is there any question in your mind who created Spider-Man?
No, there's no question in my mind. We've been celebrating Steve Ditko a couple times in recent years here in Johnstown. We've gotten the permission of the family, and they've worked together with us. The Ditko family, his brother still lives in Johnstown. His nieces and nephews are heavily involved in doing things to honor Steve. And I've gotten to become friends with some of the Ditko family. So it kind of, I'm just like kind of name dropping here. Like, yeah, I'm friends with the Ditko family, but it's still incredible to me. And I can just say that I'm friends with the Ditko family, but I learned a lot more about Steve the last couple of years, and I know that Stan Lee and Steve were co-creators, and the truth is that Steve Ditko did the majority of the work, and he'd kind of come up with the idea of the story, draw the story, take it to Stan. Stan would look it over and fill in the word balloons. And in fact, Stan said, "It's like I'm doing crossword puzzles here. I'm just filling in the after I see what you've done." But they, together they created magic. I love Stan Lee. I'll never vilify him. But all the artists had to be doing most of the work because Stan couldn't write that many comic books in 1 month. So the artists, were the driving force. Stan was the great promoter and great with dialogue. I'm just thankful that they had magic together. But we have to give Steve his credit that he did most of the work. Keep gesturing to this big poster. This is actually a reproduction of the 6-foot poster that was Steve Ditko artwork. In the 1960s, you had to mail away for it in the comic books. It was like $1.99 for a 6-foot poster. But I have the original. I just got it in 2020 on a special eBay deal. And it's in a frame, and it's downtown in a place called the Bottle Works here in Johnstown. And that's been the organization. And one of the directors, Matt Lamb, he's been in charge of and spearheading the Ditko honoring events and things we're doing. So I left mine down there. We had a 2-month-long exhibit. So mine is still down there at Bottle Works. And hopefully they're going to have a dedicated space for Steve Ditko. So this is kind of like a placeholder here, Greg, but this is identical to the original from 1965, Steve Ditko from Johnstown.
That is cool. That's classic pose. I love it. Very cool. So you said you have an original and it's on loan right now to so they have a pretty sizable Ditko exhibit there?
They had a really large one for 2 months. 2 summers ago, we had a 2-month-long Ditko exhibit. They call it the Hometown Hero exhibit. And we had a couple other events tied into that. And when they took the exhibit down there, they're hoping that it isn't finalized yet. They're hoping for a smaller space dedicated to Ditko. So I told them, keep the poster down there until you make up your minds. I don't like trying to transport it because it's in a frame. It's like in a homemade frame that my friend built for me. So I don't like transporting it back and forth. So it's down there. And I got this reproduction one off of a gentleman on eBay. And so I needed it here as a placeholder because it's so huge. Yeah. It looks to me kind of like I'm like E.T. in the movie when he's hiding in all the stuffed animals. When I have all my memorabilia out on the table here, I kind of look dwarfed by this 6-foot Spider-Man posters. It's just special that I finally got one after wanting it for so many years. And I got one that was a little beat up because I'm a high school math teacher by trade, so I can't really afford some of the things that at the prices that they go for these days. But I found one in less than mint condition and was able to pick one up.
That's awesome. That's awesome. I'm glad it's in the hands of a collector.
Yeah, for sure.
Something like that. And I feel your pain. My wife's a school teacher as well, so I fully understand that. I wanted to rewind it back to the beginning. You said that when you first got that Spider-Man comic, you already had a stack of comics there. Do you remember what that stack of comics consisted of?
They were mainly my brothers, of course. They weren't mine, but my older brothers. We had some of the Batman and some of the Superman. I remember like the 80-page giants that were like a quarter back then. We probably also had Archie comics. But we never had any of the Marvel comics, and we definitely never had any Spider-Man. But maybe if you want to step over here, my daughter's working the cell phone today. I can show you the first comic back here on the wall if you want to come around there, Noel. And I'll give you a close-up of this comic here, Greg, okay? So right here it is. The Quicksilver was the guest star. He was one of the first guest stars in the comics there. And if you look real closely, you can see my mom put her coffee cup on it. There's a coffee cup ring in the middle.
Oh, no.
It's all beat up. I cut out pictures, Greg, and put them on my bedroom wall as soon as I got that. And on the first page, there's a picture of Spider-Man sitting on his bed. He has the Spider-Man shirt off. And so in my mind, from watching the cartoon, I already was Spider-Man, Greg. So I wrote my name all over his back real big, Bruce. And, so I signed it before Stanley and before John Romita. They came later. And here's a picture of me meeting Stan when I was younger, and Stan was younger in 1986 in New York City. And down below was 10 years later in Pittsburgh. I got the chance to meet him more close to home. That's about 90 minutes away. And there's John Romita at his home back in 2019. So it was cool to meet those guys. And up above was a picture from the cartoon that I fell in love with, and it was signed at one point. I sent away for this. I didn't get to meet the man in person, but Paul Soles was the man who voiced Peter Parker, and he voiced Spider-Man, and he also voiced Hermie the Elf on Rudolph. So it was kind of cool that he has those ties to a lot of the wonderful things from my childhood.
Awesome! I didn't realize that. That's really cool.
Yeah. And then with the comics, Greg, I kept getting issues once in a while when my brothers or one of my parents would bring them home. But I noticed that I was missing issues. I would get 71, I might get number 74. So finally I got fed up with that. And when I was in first grade, I was determined on my way home from school every day walking, Greg, I'd stop at the corner store and get my Spider-Man comics and never miss another issue. And that started with issue number 99. And for current collectors, they know that this past summer, he hit a milestone, and he hit issue number 900. So I have a streak of buying current issues off the newsstand or comic book shops from 99 to now a little bit over 900. And since it's Friday night, I'm not going to do the math for you, Greg. I'm taking the weekend off from math teaching.
That's good. Yeah, that's quite a few copies. So you have all of them still to this point. You haven't gotten rid of any of them or lost any of them. You still have all of them?
Didn't lose any of those. And as an adult, I went back and bought some earlier issues. I don't have the complete run. And at this point, I can't afford some of those earlier issues. But yeah, I have all those current issues from number 99 up to over 900. And they're all like packed away in boxes and things like that. But I do have a couple other issues on the wall here and there that some of my favorites, like number 100 is up here. And it was signed by Stan Lee and John Romita in gold paint pen. And a couple other issues here and there. But I fell in love with comics first. Then I started getting heavily into the collectibles. And that's what I've been specializing in the last 30 years or so, really getting into the collectibles. What I wanted to tell you, though, I have a really nice collection. Not everything is out on the table, but I know several people around America and around the world that have better collections than me. So I'm not the biggest and best collector, but my emotional stories and things that I'm tied into Spider-Man is my claim to fame with my collection. But my jaw drops when I see some of these other guys and their collections, and so hats off to them. I'm blessed with what I have. I enjoy what I have, but I'm also a collector, Greg, that I sell things. So I'll keep the most personal things that I have in my collection, but I've bought, sold, and traded so many things over the years that, some of the stuff that you see tonight might be for sale next week. Who knows? But there's some things that will never leave. But there's all kind of collectors. Some people never sell anything. They want to keep it, until the grave, basically. But I'm a little bit different in my philosophy with buying, selling, and trading.
That's awesome. When you say you sell things, is it mostly on your website or do you do it on other outlets?
Not really on my website, because that's kind of more recent. I just developed that last May or so. But I'll sell on eBay, or I'll contact other collectors, or I'll trade. So that's a wonderful part of being a collector for so long, Greg, that I've formed some friendships with guys around the country, around the world. And some of my best friends in collecting are, maybe in Canada or Ohio or other states. And it's been a blessing to meet these guys. And we have a network now that we can kind of share, or if nobody wants it in the network, then I might put it on eBay or other places.
Yeah, well, that's really cool. You mentioned that the Ditko family decently well. Were you involved at all with the Ditko estate recently selling all of his personal books?
Yes, in fact, that was the first auction that I've ever consigned items into. I have the auction catalog here, but that was a pretty cool auction. It happened on December 8th. It was up online for about a month before that. But I have the catalog here, and it was made by the PBA. It was held by the PBA Galleries auction company. And what they did was they got connected with the Ditko family, and they had every issue of Spider-Man that Steve Ditko worked on. And they were all up for auction individually in this PBA Galleries auction. So the man that was organizing the auction, Ivan, he contacted me, and he knew me from social media. and he wanted to know if I wanted to put some memorabilia in there since there were going to be so many eyes on this auction. With people wanting to see Steve Ditko's personal Spider-Man collection up for grabs.
Yeah.
So I did send him a large box of items. Most of them sold. There's a few that didn't sell. But what's kind of cool about this catalog was, the front is, Steve Ditko artwork, close up of one of the issues that he drew, of course, back in the 60s. And on the back is one of my items that they had. And it's really cool. They took my Spider-Man Mego from the 1970s, the Mego action figure, took it out of the box and made it look real artistic like that. So it's kind of cool that was, in my collection just a couple months ago. And it sold. And on the front inside cover was the front of a shirt that I had consigned that was never used. It still had price tags with straight pins on it. And so that was the front of the shirt. And not only that, but the inside back cover was the back of the shirt. So it's kind of cool that my items, got 3 out of the four covers in this catalog. And this catalog now is almost like a piece of history because some of the description they have for comics, some of the family members were quoted and things like that. So Ditko collectors or comic collectors that really want to learn more about Ditko, this is almost like a history book for the Ditko items. But and it's kind of cool, like I said, to see my items in this book later on. Like I can see some of my items across both of these pages, but it's just it's still surreal to me, Greg, that I've done things with the Ditkos or about the Ditkos, or they've given me their blessing to do the events that I'm doing, the talks. They've given me some photos. They've given me feedback. They've come to some of my presentations. It's just awesome. Steve Ditko being from Johnstown, he probably wouldn't want all this publicity. He was a very private man, but we want to honor him, and we want people to know the truth about Steve too, because there were a lot of misconceptions about him being a hermit, being a recluse, when none of that was true. No one really knew him, but he would travel from New York to Johnstown on the train, visit with his family. They'd have some fun times. He'd do some crazy things. And the family's working on a book that's going to be released at some point, and you're going to hear the true story of what Steve Ditko was like as a man. So that's going to really rock the world of comic book fans and Ditko fans, because all they've seen are 3 or 4 grainy black and white pictures on the internet, and you're going to see him having fun and doing some crazy stuff just like a normal guy.
Well, I'm looking forward to that. Do they have a timeline for that yet, or?
The book is pretty much done. They've got to go through some legal things at the end to tie up the loose ends. But and then when that hits, it could be any day or it could be a couple of years from now. You never know in the publication world. But, I do have one letter that I sent a letter to Steve in 2015, and he always wrote back to his fans. So he wrote back a letter to me, and it's the only interaction I've had with Steve himself. So it was kind of cool that I just wanted to let him know how much I appreciated Spider-Man. I didn't ask him any questions. We were going to push the issue, but Spider-Man and Doctor Strange, which he created on his own, were only 4 years out of a 60-year career. Because he says in here, he tells everybody, I quit the Spider-Man comics in 1960s. Let's talk about what I'm doing now and what I'm going to do next month. Because as an artist, he didn't want to dwell in the past. He wanted to talk about the current and the future. But it's just cool that I do have a letter from Steve, and now I can call some of his family members my friends.
That's awesome, and that does make sense. He quit the Spider-Man title 60 years ago. So it's just when you create something that iconic, though, it's hard getting out of the shadow of it, though. So that kind of make sense.
For sure. And one of the things that we've done here in Johnstown, Greg, I'll show you a picture here in a second, to honor him in a more permanent way. We got permission. Well, Matt Lamb from the Bottle Works, he contacted Marvel Comics, and he had to ask them 38 times until they said yes. But we have the only approved Marvel Comics outdoor art in the world, right here in Johnstown, and it was just it was just installed this summer, and there's the beautiful mural to honor Steve Ditko from Johnstown, who created Spider-Man. Also, he created Doctor Strange on his own. He did that all on his own, but he was a co-creator of Spidey. And then there's a little person way down below. That's how big this thing is. It's 38 feet high. It's on a giant wall in Johnstown. And that little guy on the bottom is me in a Steve Ditko costume. So
that's you? That's awesome.
That's me and my Steve Ditko.
This is from your website. I was going to put this up too so everyone can see this. Is that you as well? I don't know if you can see the screen here, but is that you at the bottom? It looks like it is you.
My daughter's shaking her head yes. So yeah, if it's a Ditko costume, I've been wearing Spidey costumes for 20 years, Greg. And 2 years ago when we had this Ditko event for 2 months, I had to get one commissioned made exactly so it looked like I'll walk off this poster. So the person who designed it for me, I have no artistic talents, Greg. I talk. That's all I do. I gave him this picture, and I told him the spider head looked the same. I gave him a picture of the back of the costume, so the back of the costume, the spider looked the same. I got the webs in the armpits. I had to be Johnstown Spider-Man for Steve Ditko.
Yeah, that's awesome. And where did you say exactly this is at? This mural?
This mural is in downtown Johnstown. It's on a building called the Stonebridge Brewery. It's a local brewery, plus it's a little restaurant at the same time. So it's right in downtown Johnstown on Washington Street, right near about a block away from Central Park in downtown Johnstown, Pennsylvania. Hometown of Steve Ditko, who co-created Spidey, and he created Doctor Strange and so many other characters and so many universes. And he wrote a lot of stories. You know, he was a storyteller more than just an artist. But we want to celebrate him, and we're going to keep on doing things in Johnstown to celebrate him.
That's awesome. That's awesome.
Yeah.
Well, let's take a closer look at some of your pieces. One thing that you scanned past it really quick, I saw the Marvel stamp book on your table.
Oh boy, yes, the Marvel stamp book. So if your viewers don't know what was going on with this, in the 1970s, supposedly Stan Lee, but it could have been anybody at the company, came up with an idea that they were going to put these little stamps on the letter pages of your comic books, and you're going to cut them out, and you're going to put them in this booklet. You had to send away for this booklet. For 50 cents, you got this booklet, and it came with a cool poster. Now, the poster is a part that some people don't know about. I'll show you that in a second. But the idea was to cut your stamps out and start pasting them into this booklet. So obviously, I was maybe 10 years old at the time. I did whatever Stan Lee told me to do. I cut out my stamps, pasted them in the booklet, and I never got all the booklet filled up. But supposedly, after you filled up this booklet, you would get discounts, and they would stamp it for you at the New York Comic Convention. Well, I heard that only one convention allowed it to be a discount. But several key books, Greg, were ruined because kids cut out the value stamps, including the first appearance of a little-known character named Wolverine in Hulk 180, 181. And some other key comic books were kind of devalued a bit from cutting out the Marvel value stamps. But I did whatever Stan Lee said. For 50 cents, you got this booklet. And if you try to get these on eBay right now, these booklets, like from the 70s, they're all serial numbered, several $100s just to get one, whether it's filled up or not filled up. Yeah. And this poster that came with it is also very expensive because not many people kept the poster. They put it on their wall or they tore it down and they threw it away. But this is kind of cool. It's a person in a costume, and the city background is actually London. And this poster was originally a giveaway in London for the Spider-Man comics over in London in the UK. And so it was a giveaway there. So they must have had a bunch extra, and they started sending them out with the Marvel value stamp book. So you got this as a bonus just for ruining your comics. Just for ruining your comics, you got this as a bonus. But it was cool to be a kid. Obviously, we weren't, slabbing our books or keeping them nice. We were reading them. We were writing our names in them. So, cutting the stamps out, didn't really affect us too much as kids.
Yeah, it wasn't a big deal. It was an ad page anyway, right?
Yeah, right. So we cut out the stamps and we had some fun.
Cool. So why don't we just do a quick look around? Maybe tell me about some of the stuff behind you. I see a poster.
Yeah, let's talk about that.
Turn off the dark.
Yes, sir. This was the Broadway musical that was in New York City. It was the most expensive musical ever made. And my brother lives in New York City, so I went up there and I saw that musical twice. The first time when it was in the practice run, and then they changed a whole lot of it during the practice run, and then they re-released it in the official run. So I got to see it twice. My brother gifted me this on one of the trips to New York. So that was a cool thing to be able to go to that musical, and I was able to see that entertainment. Down below here is another poster, and this is actually the first ever live-action Spider-Man. And not many people know about this one, Greg. It was called the Bullwinkle Show. It was a live-action show for kids, and it was all live on stage. A whole mixture of different characters. You had Rocky and Bullwinkle, but you also had Dracula, and you had King Kong, and then you had my friend Spider-Man, of course. So I went to see it, and they saved Spider-Man for the last like 2 minutes. He came out and threw a net over Dracula and saved the day. But that was the first ever live action Spider-Man, and it only went to a few different cities in America. So I'm glad that it came here to Little Johnstown, Pennsylvania, because not many people know about that. But I was able to experience, Greg, pretty much every form of entertainment that Spider-Man has ever been involved in. So that's where that poster. That's a rare poster because they took it from city to city. They don't have a date on it. They don't have a time because they were so cheap. They would just take it down off the wall and take it to the next city and put it back up on the wall there. So it's hard to find a poster that has existed because that was in around 1973 that event happened.
Yeah, that's very interesting. I had no idea that Rocky and Bullwinkle had a show with Dracula and Spider-Man.
You're right, King Kong and everybody else, and I had to sit through all this, Greg, until the very end, and Spider-Man came out at the last minute. But yeah, pretty cool costume, and we got a chance to talk to him afterwards on the stage and things, so that was cool. And then what you see here, Greg, is maybe my main claim to fame. Like some of these guys that have a lot better collections than I do, they don't have an official no prize that they won as a child. I don't know if you know about the no prizes, Greg. You know what?
I remember the no prizes. I remember the no prize. Obviously that was before my time, but I remember reading about the no prizes. Why don't you explain them a little bit to people that don't know what they are?
In the comic books, Stan Lee would mention something about no prizes, or if you can correct the mistake that we made and tell us why it wasn't a mistake, then you could get a no prize. Well, a lot of people thought this was just an honorary thing that Stan was just joking around. But in fact, some collectors to this day don't think they really exist. But as a 7-year-old, again, I was reading this issue of Marvel Comics, Spider-Man 109, and Stan, or supposedly, or maybe someone else at the bottom of this one panel said, if you wonder how Doctor Strange and Spider-Man know each other, they met before, and a no prize if you remember when, because we don't. So obviously it was a joke, but I was a Spider-Man encyclopedia at that time, the walking encyclopedia as a 7-year-old. I took that as a serious challenge. So I wrote in my answer, and a few months later, this envelope arrived at my house. No prize. So I was so excited, I tore open the envelope, and then, Greg, the joke kind of hit me because it was an empty envelope. That's why they called it the no prize. There was no prize, but they took the time to mail these out to fans, an empty envelope, as one of their, kind of comedic gimmicks back there then in the 1970s. But so I kept it, of course. It's still here, and I took it to John Romita in 2019. He signed it for me. So you can see that the post stamp was on there from 1972, and it was 8 cents to mail letter back then. So I got my no prize, and not many people can say that in the world that they still have a no prize they earned during their childhood.
Yeah. And those, you can find those time to time for sale, and they are pretty pricey to get those. And like you said, it's just the envelope.
Yeah. Yeah, you can get them unused on eBay sometimes, or even used. Some people that have won them and want to sell them. But yeah, they're a couple $100 if you find them these days. But that sets my collection apart. Even though I don't have the biggest or best, I got a no prize.
That's awesome. That's really cool.
Yeah, good stuff.
Cool.
You want to take a look at some of the stuff on the table here? I'll show you some memorabilia.
Please do.
Walk around the front. This one up here, this little box here, was actually the first piece of memorabilia I ever got as a child, Greg. It's a sparkle paint set, and you can see Spider-Man's featured there. So somebody in my house got it for me because they knew that I loved the Spider-Man cartoon. And inside the box was this little set of brushes. They call them spreader brushes, but they're just flat pieces of plastic, cheap plastic. You had these colorful sparkle paints. They had little pieces of sparkles in them. And then, I'll go around the back here, they gave you beautiful little miniature posters. And they were already colored, but you were supposed to put the sparkles in any area you wanted to kind of embellish to make it look kind of cool. So you could kind of make Captain America's shields shiny there. There's the Spider-Man one. And this set is not my original. I finally got this on eBay a couple of years ago, but my original didn't survive. I don't know why, but these are the instructions for it. But these are getting costly too, but because this was from 1967, Kenner is still a major toy company around the world. There goes my paints. Kenner was the company that made it. So it's kind of cool that I was able to go back and get that again and have one of the very first item that I ever got as a child back in my collection again. But like I
Really? So
said,
that was the
very first non-comic book item that I ever got as a kid. But I lost my original, but I got a replacement over the years.
box in great condition too. It looks really good.
Yeah, it's pretty nice. And I take some of these things with me, Greg, when I go to my presentations. Like if I show it during my presentation, I might say, well, and here it is with me today. And I'll let the people in the audience check it out or come up and take pictures later on. And before we get to some other memorabilia, you know how I sent that letter in to win the No Prize? Well, right around the same time, I sent a letter in trying to get published, in the comic books and the fan page. And sadly, it was never published as a 7-year-old. My letter didn't get published, but I was gushing all over the new comic book called Marvel Team Up with Spider-Man and the Human Torch. It just came out, the new Spider-Man comic book that was on like an offshoot. And a couple of weeks later, I got an envelope from Marvel Comics, and these two pinups were in there. You got Spider-Man, you got Fantastic Four, and somebody at the office, took the time to personalize it to me and sign it, as Spidey down here to Bruce. And this one went up on my wall. You can see the tape, and it's all yellowed because it went on my bedroom wall for years. And the Fantastic Four, it's pretty much mint because it went back into the envelope, Greg. It didn't make the wall because I was a Spidey fan. But, it went back into the original envelope, Greg. I don't throw things away. I keep everything. So I kept the envelope from that.
That's cool.
Well. But so both times I sent letters to Marvel, things happened. And I didn't get published. But this summer I tried again. After 50 years of not trying, I tried again. And yes, my letter got published this summer in Amazing Spider-Man number 12. Of course, legacy number is 906. So this is issue 906. And my letter finally got published in the fan page. So it's my comeback story, Greg, that after 50 years of not trying, I tried again. And I finally got into the comic. Got my letter published.
That's awesome.
Yeah, so that's
really cool. Do you have that posted? Do you have that letter posted to your website? I didn't see it on there.
There's pictures of it on the website, some close-ups and things, and I took a copy of that, and I was at a convention over in Columbus, GalaxyCon Columbus, back in December, and I got the inker. The penciler, John Romita Jr., was supposed to be there, but he had to cancel. I'll get him some other time to sign it, but I got the inker, Scott Hanna, to sign it, and we talked about it for a little while, and we had a nice little conversation there. So it's kind of cool to get the chance to meet some of these professionals when I go to the conventions as well. But some of the stuff I have on the table, Greg, is really, really old stuff, and some of it is more modern. Most of it's old. I pulled out some of my best stuff. But this model kit by Aurora was from 1966. And recently I was able to acquire one that is sealed. So it's still in the original seal from way back when. I wanted one so badly as a kid.
Wow.
My older brother was great at building models, and he took me to the model shop because he knew they were there. And when the day we got there, they were all sold out. So,
oh no!
50 years later, mission accomplished. So we got one that's sealed, but they redid it, Greg, in 1974. This box, it's the same model with a couple little minor changes, but they did them with this comic book inside. You could read the comic. And when you turn the page of the comic, there were actually instructions for how to put the model kit together. So this was the instruction book, but it was also a model kit. So a comic book, but you can see the instructions are in there. And I was terrible. I couldn't glue the thing very well. I couldn't paint them very well. Luckily, these were so cheap back then. I was able to get 3 or 4 of them to get a decent shot at it. And you can see down there, I have a built version of it, but it took me a while to get good at painting and putting together model kits.
Very cool. Tell me about a couple more of the pieces that are on the table that I saw. I saw a couple other cool little.
Come on over this way for a second. You see these boxes that are standing up? These are all different Halloween costumes. And the major maker of Halloween costumes was Ben Cooper. So a lot of us as kids had Ben Cooper costumes. And these are from various years. And I used to wear them all year long and tear out the seams and need another costume. And so I had so many of these as a kid. I bought all these as an adult, just going back and finding them at different places. But you could finally look like Spider-Man. I wanted to be Spider-Man from like 1967, 68 on. In 1972, I started getting the costumes, started dressing up. And they finally, I was too old to get into the play suits, which are a little bit more sturdy than the costumes. And the play suits, there's a couple different versions of them. And this is a more modern version I'm going to hold up that will come from that yellow box I just showed you. It's all one piece, but it's made of a sturdier material than the regular costumes. Well, I found some that were even older. So this one's around 1972 or so. I found this one with a lid that didn't even have a Spider-Man picture on it because he wasn't that popular, I guess, at the time. This was from 1968. But comparing it, when you look at the costume, it had two pieces, which is kind of cool. The jersey part had extra webs on the sleeve, so it was a little bit more authentic looking than the other one, and it had buttons down the back. So when I saw these a few years back at conventions when I was, about 20 years ago, I really wanted to try to find them because this to me is the best quality of any of these they made. This one came also with like a little hood that you put over top of your head to cover up your hair, because the masks for these costumes and these play suits were not very good. You can see Spider-Man's hair. You're not supposed to see Spider-Man's hair, Greg. You're supposed to have it covered up with webs. So that came in there. Yeah, and the pants even had like the web socks. So it was cool that it was more authentic looking. And this one I don't think was ever really used. It's kind of like mint condition, still in this older box. And it even came with a little belt you could put around. Every superhero needs a belt, but Spider-Man really didn't need one. But this came with the costume as well, with a belt. So I really like that play suit version compared to the more modern ones in the 70s that, just kind of, they went on the cheap a little bit this time, Greg, when they were making these. But the Ben Cooper costumes are awesome. Good times for kids, and they're getting quite collectible now and more expensive over the years too. But I'm going to jump around the front there as you're looking at some of the things in the front, and I'm going to let me show you something in the back here. But in the 70s, as a kid, they came out with these catalogs, and they were called the superhero merchandising catalogs. You could mail away for a lot of the good things that we'll talk about in a couple seconds. But these things were like artists would draw the images, like they wouldn't take photos of the things, and then you could order so many cool things in the 70s. The 70s was a cool time to be a kid, and you could order right through these catalogs. Sometimes they were right there with the comic books, and you could just go ahead and order and get your cool superhero stuff for your collection. I'm coming around the side here. This piece, Greg, is my most emotional in my collection. It's a radio, an AM radio from the 1970s. This is mine from when I was a kid. I kind of broke the battery door. I was so impatient to get it open to put my batteries in it. But this thing was super expensive. I wanted it for Christmas. We didn't have a lot of money in my family. My mom was raising 4 kids by that point on her own. And I put it on my Christmas list, but I saw it in the 70s. It was $25. And typical toys were like $10. So I don't know how she afforded it, but it made it under the Christmas tree that year. So I still get emotional talking about that and showing it to the audiences at my shows that she sacrificed enough to get me a $25 radio in addition to other things that Christmas. But that's the most emotional piece. And later on in my career of collecting, I found one that was still in the box. I got John Romita to sign it.
Wow.
And it's still completely sealed with the instruction booklet and everything, but everything is sealed in there. Even the battery, so it doesn't explode on us, Greg, or corrode. It's all sealed in it. It's sealed in plastic. Don't worry, it's not going to hurt us. But the earpiece is sealed, and the whole thing's sealed. So it's kind of cool that I can have it in this version, like I did on Christmas morning way back when my mom got it for me. But that's my most emotional really piece in my collection. But so it's good to remember my mom and things like that whenever I think about my collecting and how she supported it on very little money back in the day.
And that's something that I really like about your collection. I'm seeing that a lot of the stuff that you've had for years and years and years, and that's a lot of collectors can't say that today. I can't even say that. I'm for one, I'm too young, but that's really neat that so many of your items that you're showing me you've had since you were a little kid. That's really cool to me.
Yeah, a lot of them that I did, but like I said, as an adult, I had money to go back and get the things I couldn't get as a kid.
Absolutely.
Like this sealed model kit, I missed out on it as a kid. Had to pay a few more dollars for it recently to get that, or this puppet was from 1966. I didn't even know it existed. I was 2 years old, but the box is a repro. But this is exactly what the box would look like. If you find it in the box like this, it would be way out of my price range. But I bought the repro box The puppet is original from the 60s, but some of the things from the 70s were kind of cool. I sent away through Foom. Foom was good to send away for things. I sent away for a cool record album called A Rock Comic. John Romita art, beautiful John Romita art in the front and the back.
Yeah.
And when you opened it up, it had John Romita comic strips that you would listen to as you listened to the radio. So the record, because they were like 5 different adventures, and there would be a cool 70s song at the end of each one. And the artwork was just so beautiful. I used to listen to this like 4 or 5 times a day when I first got it.
Yeah.
And it's just a cool piece that I remember ordering it. It was the first thing I ordered through the mail, the Rock comic. And since then, as an adult, I went back and recently got this 50-year-old 8-track tape that you throw in your car stereo system. And this one is still sealed, 50 years old, and it's still sealed. And they also made it in a cassette version. For those of us who had cassettes way back when, you could pop that in your cassette player, Rock comic. But the cassettes and the 8-tracks are hard to find, but there's a lot of the LPs on eBay and things. And I was lucky enough, too, to find this recently. It's kind of like a promotional kit that they sent out to radio stations and record stores. And it's a folder of different items to promote that Rock comic LP. So it's just near to my heart. So I kind of been going overboard trying to find all the different variations of the labels and things with the Rock comic. So that was a cool piece from my childhood that I remember. Foom was good. That first issue of Foom that I got, I ordered that. And the second thing that I ordered was this wonderful bronze medallion. And again, it was nice John Romita artwork. And it came in a Ziploc bag. I still have the bag from 1974. I used to fold it up, put it in my pocket. You can see the rings from the medallion. Carry it around the neighborhood, flip it, show it to my friends. But I never threw away the bag. And that medallion, is one of my favorite things because I ordered it, through the mail. But like I said, some of these other things I got as an adult, some of these like glasses and things that were, from the 1970s. This was called a Federal glass because it wasn't like a Pepsi. It wasn't a 7-Eleven. It had really no advertising on it. They called it Federal glass. And I took it to John Romita's house that day, and he signed it in 2019. But here's some of those old Slurpee cups and things. I never used these as a kid, but I got them as an adult, all these plastic cups. And they had a glass version of from 7-Eleven store back in the 70s. But yeah, all kind of cool stuff to have as a kid back then.
Yeah, that's really neat. A lot of the cups and stuff like that. I have a couple of the Slurpee cups myself. That's pretty neat. Yeah. Trying to look and see what else I can see there.
We're gonna show you something bigger over here, Craig. You ready for this? I don't know if you're ready for it. Look at this pinball. I'm showing the pinball machine. This is a 1980 Gottlieb pinball machine, full size pinball machine. Still, we have restored it over the years. It still works. I didn't get it until 2000. It was already 20 years old, but it's a full size pinball machine. Let me take these records off the way here, and you can check it out. But beautiful artwork on it from the late 70s, and it was a wonderful full size pinball machine.
That is fantastic. I'm a huge gamer, and pinball was one of the first things that I remember playing. My grandparents had multiple pinball machines at their house. I wish they would have had a Spider-Man one, but I love pinball.
Well, you're lucky that you had people that had pinball in their house. So I only knew one family in all of Johnson had pinball in their house, but I got this at a really good price. It was kind of beat up when I got it, but I restored it.
Yeah.
And the outside looks like it's brand new, but maybe I'll show you what the outside used to look like, Greg, when I first bought it. Because people would stand next to the machine and watch their friends playing the game, and they'd wear off the paint. So this is what the side used to look like. My friend and I kind of sanded it down, and we repainted it, and we got a sign company to put the red and blue on. Maybe you can show them a little bit of the side. You can move a couple of things out of the way here. But the side now is like back to mint condition after all that. But the one piece that we had in front that I'll hold for you here, Greg, this one is super tough to find. It might be the rarest item that I own. I'm not 100% sure. This is an unused play field for this machine. So where the ball rolls around and all the parts are usually on there, the flippers, the bumpers, and all the targets, this one was never used. And I've been told from pinball experts that they weren't supposed to like make these intentionally, that there must have been some kind of little cosmetic flaw that made this be rejected from going into a machine. So we're not sure. No one knows how many of these were actually available. And when pinball collectors get these, you can't get them out of their collection. So I was very fortunate to get this one, but we don't know how many were made. But I'm going to keep it like this. I'm never going to put a part on it, and I'm going to eventually kind of display it on the wall or something like a piece of art. But this one is super tough to come by, unused pinball playfield. And then up on the ceiling there, my daughter's pointing and telling me to talk about the white background. That's like the side of my pinball machine exactly. And everybody always asks me, where did you get that Gottlieb sign, that white sign? Well, it was, like I said, to get the red and blue paint on my machine, I actually had an outdoor sign company do it. And they're stickers. The red and blue are stickers. So they practiced on that piece of white cardboard. So that's not really an item that people could buy. So everyone freaks out when they see it. You know, people that know about Gottlieb, like, where did you get that? Is that a display model? And it's no, it was just a test model for my machine when they were restoring it for me. So everybody freaks out about that one. But so my daughter wanted me to talk about that one. Cool. This one is a cool one. I got it at Spencer's Gifts. You know, Spencer's are still in malls around America. In 1975, a black light poster. It has like that velvet, like black velvet on it. And so I remember buying that at the local Spencer's way back in the 70s at my mall.
That's awesome. That's awesome. And how about the poster right behind you, right behind your left shoulder there?
Yeah, that one was a mail away from Marvel Mania, the second Marvel Comics fan club. They had a mail away for it. They had a whole series of them with different characters, and they're very expensive these days. This was around 1970 or so, and they actually had a version that Jack Kirby did originally. And Jack was the king. He did a lot of characters well. He never could get Spider-Man done well. So after they looked at it, and John Romita, the artist of this one, was doing the comic book at the time, so it made more sense. They kind of scrapped the Kirby one, but the Kirby one is out there. It has like a Sentinel in it from the X-Men, so it's just a weird Spider-Man poster. But you know, if you can find it, it's pretty rare. But this is a cool version with John Romita who did this artwork. This is his running pose that kind of imitated the big Ditko 6-foot pose. But Romita really commercialized Spidey a lot in the 70s, and a lot of products had this running Romita image on it. But this is like a popcorn plastic, they call it, or melted plastic decoration that you can get for different holidays, Easter and Christmas. And I gave one of these to John Romita, as you saw in the picture earlier. When I went to his house, I asked him if he still had one of these from 1977 or ever had one, and he hadn't. And I had a few extras, so I kind of gifted him one when I was there at his house back in 2019.
That is awesome.
Yep,
that
good
is
time.
Awesome.
Good times. Some of these things are from my childhood. On the table here too, Greg. Some of these were from my childhood. Like I actually played with some of these action figures, or the web shooter that you could put on your wrist and shot the dart out. And you know, of course, it broke after a little while. But some of these I bought as a kid and played with them. But then I was able to go back and get them still, like this airplane in a box. I played with that as a kid. This little punch ball was one of the first things I can remember, you know, buying myself at a store and blowing it up and playing with it all day long. So finding these on eBay or other places have been cool to me. All these little toys that I played with as a kid. And the Migos are really costly these days. And I got the box off someone and put my original Green Goblin back in the box. So it's just kind of cool to have all these stuff, you know, some of the stuff from my childhood and the things I'm emotionally connected to. But it's been a good 55 years of collecting. Some of the modern stuff, this is really modern. Like this was this past year was the 60th anniversary of Spider-Man. And here's Cinnamon Toast Crunch.
Yeah.
And a lot of products had this artwork on it celebrating the 60th anniversary. Well, this box wasn't sold in stores. It was limited to 1,962 editions because that was the year Spider-Man was created. Each one's numbered. And on the back, you see nice artwork from Amazing Fantasy, a magnetic little opening, and you got the 2 pages there. But this sold out on Walmart's website in an hour. They were $10, and they didn't have like a limit, so they didn't have a really good distribution system. So I missed out on getting them. So I had to go on eBay and pay the higher fees, and get a few boxes for the collection. That's a cool item.
Oh,
I don't buy much
that is
current
cool.
stuff, but if it's kind of like a celebration of Steve Ditko Amazing Fantasy 15,
Yeah.
then I'll buy it. But I don't buy many of the current things these days.
Yeah, that's a tough one to get these days. Amazing Fantasy 15. I noticed on the first page they have they have it true to the first page, the splash page there, which is kind of cool.
Yeah, very cool.
What I did notice something on your pinball machine that you moved out of the way. You had a golden record. You tell us a little bit about
Oh yeah,
that.
yeah, yep. I'll bring it around. Um, Years ago, Greg, right before I got married in 1998, I sold about 400 items. That's what I call my purge. I wasn't quitting, but at times, like I said, I sell things if I need money. I needed money for down payment on a house and help for the wedding and things like that. So I sold a lot of things, and I had all 4 of the golden record LPs sealed with the comic book, and I sold them all back then.
Wow, sealed.
Sealed. I made a good bit of money on them, but now the money I made on all 4 probably I would make that just selling one these days if I still had a sealed one. But this one isn't sealed, so it doesn't have the reprint of Amazing Spider-Man #1, but it's the record from 1966, and the same idea as the Rock comic. You would listen to the record and you would read along with the comic book. But I don't have a copy of the comic anymore. Just the old record from 1966. Looks kind of boring, but written by Stan Lee and rewarding and affected by other people. But that was a cool album to have, but don't have the comic. I'd like to get the comic, but they're just so expensive.
It is, but it seems easier to find the comic than the record. So I think you're ahead of the game there.
Yeah, it is easier to find, but much more expensive, of course, for the comic these days. But yeah, I had them all sealed, and I have pictures of all the stuff that I collected and sold back then. And who knows, maybe I'll make a book out of the pictures some days. But yeah, I had. Some of my collecting friends said, "Man, you say that phrase a lot." I said, "What phrase?" You say, "I had that at one point," because I did have it at one point and sold a lot of things. I've also got a lot of things back again. Here's something that the Golden Record Company made at the same time. So we're talking about that. They made a 45. So you've probably seen that one for sale now, or maybe you haven't. But nice figural cardboard, and it's the 45, the smaller record in there. Spider-Man and the Fickle Fly.
Awesome.
Spider-Man and the Fickle Fly. So a lot of things I missed out on in my childhood because I wasn't getting out to the stores. And like I said, I didn't start getting things until about 1968, 1969. So as an adult, I went back and bought a lot of things. And sometimes I surprise myself at what I get, Greg. This is an example of that. This is a little ashtray, and it's ceramic. It's hard, and it was made by the Lyric company. And I saw it at an outdoor vendor, like an old-fashioned bargain day, or like they bring in vendors and they sell all over on the streets on tables. And it was the only Spider-Man item I saw all day. This is about 30 years ago, and I didn't know what it was. I never saw it before. I wasn't sure if it was real or a knockoff. So I got it for about $40, $45. Well, it turns out no one had ever seen it before, but someone bought a Human Torch one, and it was a employee gift at Marvel Comics for like the holidays. So when the person that bought the Human Torch found out that I had a Spider-Man, he called me and asked me if I would sell it. And at that time, I had never sold anything, but I wasn't against it. So he kept offering money, and I ended up selling the first one that I had in my collection. And all the money that he paid me went towards buying my wife an engagement ring. So
wow,
either I'm a great guy, Greg, or I'm a very cheap guy. I bought a $45 engagement ring for my wife. But then I got this one a couple of years later when they started to surface a little bit more. Like the true price came out that, and I got it at a decent price, and I took it to John's house in 2019, and John Romita, the artist, and he signed it. But this is a cool piece just for my wife and I to remember, that I had one, and I sold it to get her the engagement ring that she still wears almost 25 years later.
Fantastic. Yeah. How many pieces did you have John Romita sign when you met him?
Oh, probably about 10. I mean, I'm showing you most of them here, but we didn't want to overwhelm him. My friend would take a few people.
Yeah.
We didn't want to overwhelm him, but he signed about 10 things. I probably sent some books with my friend earlier than that, some comic books like years before that he signed for my friend while he was visiting. So probably about 10 things, but you're getting to see most of them here in our interview today.
That's really cool. That's really cool. And was that something you had to keep asking to meet Mr. Romita, or did it something that kind of happened organically, or how did that come about?
Well, my friend would go quite frequently. He got in really close with John and his wife, and they had become friends over the years. But he was about 3 hours away from me, so he would actually take a route that wouldn't go past my house, so it wasn't too convenient. But I asked him a few times. I would see him taking other friends to John's house, so I kind of bugged him enough that he finally took me. He was a very kind person and took me to John's house. But like I said, a lot of times I ride in the coattails of my friends that have connections, and so I asked him a few times, and I was so thankful and blessed to make that trip to John's house. And it was unreal to be sitting in John Romita's living room talking to John and his wife. It was just one of those things like, did that really happen or didn't it? But one of those cool things,
Yeah.
connections with me and Spidey that have just, amazed people when I tell them the story. It still amazes me when I tell the story because I'm just a collector, but I've been living a great Spidey life.
That's awesome. In your presentations, is that something you kind of go over? I know you said you talk about your connections with Spidey. Are there a few things that you can kind of share with us other than what you have already?
Yeah, I'm going to walk this way and I'll show you this display while we're talking about it. But basically, I try to show them some of the key pieces, like I've shown you, like, and kind of go chronologically, like my first comic book, my first piece of memorabilia, meeting Stan Lee, spending time at John Romita's house, showing them pictures of me with my mom when I was a kid dressed as Spidey, and I talk about some of the TV shows or interviews like what I'm doing with you. This is going to probably go into one of my sequel stories that I tell, in other presentations I develop.
Awesome.
But I tell these stories. I'll point out. I'll take my Ditko letter. I'll tell them about the Ditko things I've done in Johnstown. I'll show them, maybe newspaper articles like this summer. There was a TV crew that came up from Pittsburgh called Hunting Nostalgia, and they did a 30-minute show about me. When they came to town, they met me down by the mural just for some photos and some video there. Well, the newspaper showed up, a local newspaper, and my local TV crew showed up. So not only did I get on the TV show, I got on the local news and on the newspaper. So I'll show this to the audiences, up on the big screen, and I'll tell them stories of collecting. I'll tell them how I met Stan Lee, how I live in Steve Ditko's hometown, and some places they even like build these little posters for me. So when I went to Comic-Con Erie and I showed up to my table, they had this waiting for me. And at my table, I sell some items. I don't take my old stuff, but I still sell some things to help out with gas money and things to get to the conventions. But it was kind of cool to see that. I was like surprised when I got there that they had my times of my presentations, a little picture of me, a little nickname for me, Bruce Weck. But it's just been a real blessing to go to these conventions and meet so many people and talk to so many people. Sometimes my audiences are large, and sometimes they're small. But I would tell these stories for even just one person, especially my second presentation that we don't see the banner for here. It's called Steve Ditko, Spider-Man and Me, Johnstown, Pennsylvania Connections. And I can talk about Steve and the things that we're doing here in Johnstown to honor him and his connection with Spider-Man and myself over all the years. But that's what I pretty much do at the presentations. I tell my stories and my emotional connections. I'll talk about my mom getting me that radio. I'll talk about the things we're doing in Johnstown. I'll show images of myself, in the Ditko or other costumes, and talk about how I've been, making presentations in Johnstown as Johnstown Spider-Man for the past 20 years. And it's just all kind of combined. And I try to make it, emotional. I try to make it funny. I can see people, tearing up sometimes. I can see them laughing and hear them laughing. So I try to make it just general enough for the people that aren't Spider-Man fans, so that there's something for them to relate to. And as well as, more intensive stuff, of course, for the Spidey fan.
Absolutely, and it's so cool that for people that haven't ever been to a Comic Con, that this is one of the main reasons you get to meet people like Bruce that really have a love for comics and the culture that goes around comics, not just the comics. As you show, you got all these other items that really add into the whole aura of what comics are. It's really cool to see this.
I've really felt fallen Spider-Man at an early age, and the comic books were a big part of it. And like I said, I've specialized in the memorabilia, but in recent months, I'm starting to fall in love with comics again. I follow some people on Instagram known as Big Red Comics, and they do some sales in the evenings, and so I'm falling in love with comics again as well. But it's just like I said, when I go to these conventions, maybe you're not into Spider-Man, Greg, but there's something about my story or about Spider-Man collecting that you can relate to. And you know, maybe the things that you collect, I would still relate to it as a collector and someone who's enjoyed it over the years. And it was kind of funny, like I said, whenever Hunting Nostalgia came up, if you go watch their TV show, it's on YouTube, Hunting Nostalgia, and you watch the episode, the man in charge, Nick Bartley, he's a real character, and we laughed all day long when he was here in my home and down at the mural. But you know, he said it best. He said, "My smile and my passion is what he really is looking for." And you know, he made me laugh, and I was smiling all day long. But I smile when I talk about Spider-Man, and I think about the things I've done in my life with Spider-Man, and the collecting and everything. And one of my other friends has called me the foremost ambassador for Spider-Man, so that's my new nickname for my collecting friends. But it's just been a joy, a real blessing to me to be involved with all these things and to have good memories of it. Like I said, it's not the most important part of my life, but God's blessed me with it, and hopefully that can be a blessing to you and other people when I tell the stories, or kind of tap into your world of collecting as well.
Absolutely. And I'm very thankful that you came on and were able to talk to me about some of your experiences and Spider-Man. I'm a huge Spider-Man fan too. So that's kind of where it got started for me. For some reason with me, I remember some of the first Spider-Man books that I looked at were it was Hobgoblin, not Green Goblin, but Hobgoblin. So
Right.
it was around that time. I'm an 80s kid, and he was very popular throughout the late 80s. So that's who is your number one Spidey villain?
Well, I have to go with the Green Goblin just because he was the most deadly, and the most unpredictable and the most exciting, at the time too. But I loved it when they brought the Hobgoblin out. I was buying those comics. I was in college at the time, so I'm a little bit older than you, Greg. But that's my number one. But let's talk about Steve Ditko one more time, because he created all those villains, all the best villains in
Hmm.
the first 38 issues of Spider-Man. There's not a rogues gallery in the history of comics that can compare with the Spidey villains. At least in my opinion, I'm a little biased, but I'll fight that fight with anybody. But all those characters, the Green Goblin, the Sandman, Mysterio, Electro, you know, and on and on. Craven the Hunter,
Lizard,
the Chameleon,
Lizard, Scorpion.
Lizard. I mean, just name. I mean, all the top Spidey villains, other than maybe the Kingpin and Hobgoblin in later years, they're all creations of Steve Ditko. So to me, he was a creative genius. But and
I absolutely agree.
the thing about Spidey too, like one event I was at recently, Greg, they wanted me just to be a cosplay star, so I was dressed as Spidey, and there were other cosplayers, and it was called a Halloween dress rehearsal. So kids were coming in costume. So we're in one room all together, and I'm with a really professional woman who does like 45 different cosplays, and I've seen her other shows, and she's very nice. I'm kind of asking her for advice of what to do as a cosplayer, and one kid came running in when I wasn't looking, and he screamed "Spider-Man!" and he came charging over, and afterwards she even said to me, she says, "Spider-Man has that effect on people. It's probably the color combination of the costume and just the cool style that Steve Ditko made that costume again and made that style." But
Yeah,
so many kids and young people, and yourself, as you're saying, they just connect with Spider-Man. Whether it's the image plus the background story of how he's responsible for things and his problems, he has issues, but for some reason, the hero that you and I love so much has really exploded, and it could possibly be the biggest, superhero out there these days. At the beginning, I was just loving him. I was trying to convince my friends to love him. They weren't really too sure about it, but it's been kind of cool that I got connected with the guy that is possibly the most popular superhero at this point.
I absolutely agree. I think it's how they humanized him compared to other big superheroes like Superman.
Yeah.
It was something that Marvel did very different than DC, and that's what helped take over from from the '60s
Uh,
really on. I don't think that they've really let up since Spider-Man came out. Like you said, that was the beginning of the end for DC being the number one on the on the pecking order there.
Yeah, the new kid on the block kind of took over with all the like you said, personalizing the characters, giving them problems, things that we can relate to. What kind of problems does Superman
Yeah,
have? He doesn't have any problems. Or Batman, he has all the money in the world. What kind of problems does
yeah.
he have? Yeah.
And then they all of a sudden they throw a high school kid in there, and look at how everyone starts buying it.
Yep.
It's kind of crazy. The whole I enjoy hearing the story about how AF-15 came about and how they thought really nothing of it, and all of a sudden you have this mega hero that
You can't stop it. It was like it was a force of nature. It just took off. It was in that dying comic book, and fans loved it so much. It sold so well that they started his own comic book, and the rest is history.
and with that I'm going to roll into my next thing. Who is the best live actor that plays Spider-Man?
I get that question a lot too, and my daughter, who's doing the filming here, she was a young child when the first movie came out. She wasn't born yet, but she was born shortly after the movie came out, and she's been kind of indoctrinated into them. But I love all of them. I'm very hard on Spider-Man entertainment as far as the movies go. The TV shows in the '70s, they were a little cheesy, of course, but the movie, I loved them all. I think they all did a good job. But I got so emotionally connected during the first three movies with Tobey that's got to be my go-to guy. But they all did a great job.
I agree with you, but it's probably the same for the same reasons. Where I just got very connected with Spidey. Toby did
Yeah,
do a great job.
yeah,
So
you can't
what did
help
you
it.
think of No Way Home?
No Way Home, I loved it. It's not my favorite Spider-Man movie. I loved all the Spider-Man movies, but that one, I call it a movie event. With the way they brought back all the Spider-Man into that movie from the other movies, you'll never see that in any other movie franchise. So I call that a Spider-Man movie. I call it a movie event. And so many people cheered during that movie at different stages. I've never heard cheering more than once, maybe twice in the movie, but I heard four or five different, the whole audience erupted four or five times. So it was a very cool movie. My favorite movie is the second Spider-Man with Tobey, with Dr. Octopus. I think that's the most comic booky movie, like the scene cuts and the way that they acted it out.
Yeah.
It just more like a comic book to me. I don't expect the movies to replicate the comics because the movies they got to be general for general audience. I'm fine with that. Comic books, they can be more intensive comic book fans like you and I. But that second movie with Dr. Octopus, it just felt more like a comic book. And to me, that's the best superhero movie that I've seen to this point.
What would you like to see them do with the movie series from here? Would you like to see a new actor, stick with Tom Holland, bring Toby back again? What would you like to do from here?
I'm fine with whatever.
If you were the director,
if I were in charge, I got to stick with Tom as long as he's willing to do it, and the stories are there because we want to see what happens now. Now that he's back to like nobody knowing who he is, and he's got a cloth costume, and that was a really exciting point when he took off at the end of that movie, and it was like he made his own costume, and that's the Spider-Man I know from the comics making his own costume. So I'd love to see that.
Yeah.
I'd also love to see offshoots, like if you want to go back into Tom Holland's universe or Tobey Maguire's universe and show what happens, great. You want to go back and show Andrew Garfield's universe? That'd be awesome too. If they have the money to do it, I think the fans would go out and see it.
Absolutely. Anything they put out is making $1 billion, so I wouldn't be surprised if we see it.
Exactly. I mean, I couldn't believe that they got all three of those guys to agree to that movie, and they could afford to pay them. But they make so much money. But a year out, when people were saying that was going to happen, I said, no way, that's not going to happen. But within 6 months, with everyone getting so excited about it, I knew that they had to do it, or else people wouldn't have gone to see the movie if they heard that all three weren't in there.
Yeah.
They would have had a disaster on their hands. So I was on the camp that said no, they're not going to do it. Then I switched over about 6 months before the movie, and I knew that they had to do it.
Yeah, no, you're probably right. There'd be a big fallout if everyone's expecting all three and then it didn't happen. So I think that was a good move on their part. Have you started your Miles Morales collection yet, or are you sticking pretty much with Peter Parker?
I pretty much stick with Peter Parker. I appreciate the Miles character, and I haven't read too many comics with him in it. But I don't buy many comics. I'm staying mostly with Amazing Spider-Man to keep that run going that I had from number 99 to 912, whatever it is now. Once in a while, I might get a side issue here and there, but I'm old school, so I just like having one Spider-Man, one Peter Parker. But I appreciate having the offshoots for people, and people are really enjoying Miles. They're really enjoying Spider-Gwen, Ghost Spider. So the more the merrier for them,
Yeah.
but I like to keep it to the original.
I think that's a good thing what they did with the multiverse, that it allows multiple Spider-Man to be running at the same time. So it's not nothing.
Yeah,
It's nothing to be questioned. So
it
it definitely
keeps it
makes sense.
interesting, keeps it fresh for the newer people, and an old guy like me can still enjoy just the one Spider-Man.
Exactly, exactly. No, I know you said that you're old school, so you probably don't do this. But how do you feel about the modern variants that are coming out for Spider-Man? Do you collect any of those, or do you just go with the A covers?
I do mention the variants, especially in my Ditko presentation, because even
Okay.
though Steve quit the book 55 years ago or 58 years ago, they still use sometimes Ditko covers as variants, as you know, and those are sought
Yeah.
after. So I show those in my presentation. I said, still to this day, they know how to make the money at Marvel. If they put Ditko on the cover, it'll sell. Once in a while, I'll get the variants. I have a good collecting friend, Aaron, who collects every variant of every issue. He has like the most complete Spider-Man comic book collection that I've ever heard of. But I'm not a real big variant guy. If it's something that's emotional to me, or if it's like a tip of the cap, something from the old days, I'll try to get it. But otherwise, variants are cool, but I don't have that kind of money anymore.
Makes sense. There's so many of them now. There's so many
Yeah,
coming out each month. It would definitely break us all pretty quick if we
yeah,
bought them
for
all.
sure.
And I don't know. As you can see, I'm a hockey fan, and
Oh,
you're from
cool.
Johnstown, PA. The first thing I thought of when I thought of that, other than Ditko, is a little movie called Slapshot.
A little movie filmed
Yeah,
right
a
here
little movie.
in Pennsylvania.
One of
Filmed
my
right here
favorites.
in
One of my
Pennsylvania.
favorites.
Hey, it's probably if you it's always voted as one of the favorite sports movies or the favorite hockey movie, of course. And it was filmed here in Johnstown, uh, and released, I believe, in 1977 or so. But it was cool because the city was like charged up by that. Uh, we were a steel town, so in the early 70s we started to go downhill, just like Pittsburgh, Allentown. Steel industry started going down. So we were kind of getting depressed in this area. So that movie being filmed here in Johnstown, that lifted our spirits up a little bit. Some of my older siblings were in various scenes in the movie. My oldest brother Bob, you can see him really clearly up close in the crowd. One time he's yelling at the hockey game. So it's kind of cool that our town is known for slapshot, and we do a lot of different like slapshot uh, honoring events in town. And some of those guys, some of the Hanson brothers, still live in the area, and they show up for different events. So yeah, slapshot in Johnstown, that's one of the better things that we're known for.
Yeah, I figured you'd have to have a museum or something dedicated to it at this point.
Yeah, we have some things, not a full museum, unfortunately, but maybe somewhere down the road we'll do that. But we do have memorabilia at different
Yeah.
places. That arena is still functioning to this day where they filmed, and there's still hockey being played there.
That's awesome. I've always been a huge Paul Newman fan, so that's kind of what drew me
Yeah,
in.
Paul
But
Newman.
again, I'm a hockey fan too.
Yeah, we also had to film about 7 years later one of Tom Cruise's first movies, All the Right Moves, the football movie. That was filmed here in
Really? I didn't
Johnstown.
know that.
Yeah, those are the two major films that we've done here in Johnstown, Pennsylvania.
That's cool. Yeah, I didn't realize that. I didn't realize you're so close to Pittsburgh either. That's where my family's from, so that's pretty neat.
Yeah, we get to Pittsburgh often. It's about 75 minutes from here, so good times to be going to Pittsburgh.
Awesome. So, if is there anything else you want to share about Spider-Man? What would you say to a new collector that's trying to decide between Spider-Man and Iron Man of what to collect? What would you say to him to sway him?
I wouldn't try to sway them too much, and I tell people collect what you love, and that's what I've done for 55 years. Um, you can collect if you want to try to get an investment back from your purchases, and it's possible. But they pump out so many items these days; it's hard to collect new things and hope to get an investment on it. If you collect the older things, you get an investment, but collect what you love. I won't try to talk you out of any character. I've loved Spider-Man since I was 3 or 4 years old, and you know I can debate with you if you want me to about you versus your hero versus my hero, but collect what you love. We all have our heroes for whatever reasons. We gravitate towards characters, and I won't talk anybody out of that. Um, I wanted to mention too that I do write articles nowadays for a major Spider-Man website. It's called SpidermanCrawlspace.com. It was established way back in 1998, and the man who created the website, Brad Douglas, he's the first one to interview me 2 years ago. So after 53 years of collecting, I was discovered, Greg, 2 years ago, and he now has me writing articles with matching videos called Spidey Stash. So one of mine was about the Ben Cooper costumes. So I talk about them. I show a PowerPoint video and some photos, and other ones were like mail away items. Some were school items, but I'm very thankful for the opportunity to write for that major Spider-Man entertainment website called SpidermanCrawlspace.com. So if people want to check out some of my articles and other things that are happening, that's a really cool website.
Awesome. Thanks for sharing. And I'll put that link down below of the description of this video so you guys can visit Bruce over at his website. You said SpidermanCrawlspace.com.
Yep, and my articles are called Spidey Stash. Brad Douglas came up with that key name. He's like the Stan Lee of the website. He comes up with all the great ideas.
He fills in the bubbles.
Yeah, he fills in my word balloons whenever I'm done with my artwork.
Awesome. Are there any other stories do you think that everyone would like to hear before you take off? I really appreciate your time. I know we've gone a little bit over on time, but I really do appreciate you stopping in with me.
Well, I appreciate you talking with me. When I talk with Brad, I've done 2 interviews with Brad already. They've been almost 2 hours each, and it's something new every time. We're going to do another one tomorrow, which would be January 8th. I know this isn't a live video, but we're doing another live one. But we've talked for 2 hours each time, so I don't mind the time of talking, and I'm thankful that my daughter has stamina to hold her cell phone this whole time. Yeah, she's a real trooper. But yeah, my family has been a blessing to me. Like I said, my kids, unfortunately, they were indoctrinated. She loves Spider-Man. My son, he's now 6'4". He's a senior in high school, and his high school colors are red and blue, and they call him Spidey. When he's pitching, he's doing well. Even the other team, if it's their rival, they know that he's Spidey. They try to get on his nerve. I call him Spidey. So after he strikes someone out, he'll look over at their bench and he'll shoot the webs at all the players on the bench. So it's been cool just to have a family that supports it, that has some fun with it. They can't escape it with me being so in love with Spider-Man over all the years. But like I said, God's blessed me with great health, great family, great loved ones, and a great job, and with a great time with Spider-Man over the years. And it's just my pleasure to share it. And whenever we connected on the internet, I'm glad, Greg, that we could do this. And it's my pleasure. And it just brings me joy to bring my stories to people. And if you ever want to talk again, if we forget something or something new happens, there's something new happening almost every day. It seems like with the Spidey, it just keeps on rolling. But Spidey and me, eventually I'm going to write a book, Greg, because I can't tell all my stories to you or in a 50-minute presentation at a convention. So I'm going to write a book. I've written some chapters, and so be on the lookout for the Spidey and Me book, where all my stories can be told, and you can take your time leisurely reading through. If you have trouble falling asleep, you can probably read that and fall asleep in just a couple seconds.
Well, I appreciate it. I would love to have you on again once you're getting closer to that book. We can talk about that for sure. And that sounds like that would be something that's very interesting, and it's awesome. It sounds like you have spider blood in your family. It sounds like everyone is vested into it, and that's great. Like I say, Bruce, thanks again. Like I say, I'm going to put your links below. That way everyone can visit your website. Again, Bruce is from Johnstown, Pennsylvania. He is a Spider-Man super fan, and everything that he has is very impressive, Bruce. Thank you so much for sharing with me. Oh,
I appreciate it, Greg, and I'm truly thankful that you brought me on, and I'm looking forward to getting to know you better and talk about collectibles. I want to hear your stories sometime about your collecting, because I'm doing all the talking here, but I want to hear your stories at some point too.
Absolutely. We can flip the table sometime.
Yeah, awesome. Appreciate it, man, and God bless everybody that's watching. Keep on collecting, keep on enjoying. Collect what you love, and you'll always love what you collect.
Have fun, stay safe, buy comics, buy collectibles. See you later, Bruce.
Thank you, Greg.